The Lantern Keeper of the Misty Moor. The moor was never truly silent, though many believed it was. It breathed softly, like a sleeping thing, rising and falling beneath the night sky. Mist drifted low across the heather, moving slowly, patiently, as if it had all the time in the world. Each evening, just as the last light slipped behind the distant hills, the Lantern Keeper stepped from his small stone cottage at the edge of the land. He did this every night. He wrapped his coat close around him, not because the air was cold, though it often was, but because the night deserved gentleness. In his hand, he carried a long pole, and at its end hung a lantern made of old glass and brass. Its light was warm, steady, and calm, never flickering, never in a hurry. The keeper paused for a moment before beginning his walk. He listened, the soft hush of wind through grass, the far-off call of an owl, the quiet settling of the earth as day finally let go. Then, slowly, he stepped onto the path. The moor stretched wide and open, its rolling shape softened by fog. Stones lay half-hidden, paths appeared and faded, and the land shifted gently as the mist moved. Some said it was easy to lose your way here, but the Lantern Keeper knew every rise and hollow by heart. He walked at an unchanging pace. Not fast, not slow, just steady. At the first marker stone, he stopped. From his satchel, he took a smaller lantern and lit it from the one he carried. He set it carefully upon the stone, adjusting it so the light faced the path. The glow spread softly, pooling on the ground like spilled honey. This was how the night began. As he continued onward, the fog thickened, curling around his boots, brushing his knees like a quiet tide. The keeper did not mind. He welcomed it. The mist softened the world, blurred sharp edges, and made everything feel distant and safe. Somewhere far off, a traveler might pause and wonder which way to go. And then, there it would be. A light, waiting. The Lantern Keeper never hurried, even when the fog grew dense. He trusted the rhythm of his steps, the familiar weight of the pole in his hand, the gentle swing of the lantern beside him. With each light he placed, the moor became kinder. At an old wooden signpost, worn smooth by time, he lit another lantern. At a narrow crossing between two low hills, another. At the edge of a shallow stream where water whispered over stone, he paused longer, listening to the sound before setting the light down. The night seemed to sigh contentedly. Sometimes, the keeper thought he heard footsteps behind him, but when he turned, there was only mist and moonlight. He never worried. The moor had its ways, and none of them meant harm. He walked on. Stars appeared overhead, faint and distant, their light softened by drifting cloud. The lanterns below mirrored them, small constellations glowing gently across the land. For those who wandered here, tired, unsure, moving slowly, the lanterns did not demand attention. They did not shout or flash. They simply waited, quietly suggesting a direction, a next step, a moment of rest. The keeper believed this was important. Light should never rush anyone. As the hours passed, the fog began to thin. The moor revealed itself again in soft outlines, hills, stones, paths now gently glowing with guidance. The Lantern Keeper reached the far edge of his route. He stopped there, as he always did, and looked back across the land. The moor shimmered with calm light. Satisfied, he turned and began the long walk home, leaving the lanterns to do their quiet work. They would burn until morning, and then fade gently with the dawn. By the time the keeper reached his cottage, the night felt settled. Complete. At peace, he hung his lantern by the door and stepped inside, closing it softly behind him. Outside, the mist drifted on. The lanterns glowed, and anyone still walking the moor found their way, one gentle light at a time. The moor breathed in, and breathed out, and the night carried on, slow and kind. The village where time slowed after sunset. There was a village tucked gently between low hills and winding hedgerows where evenings behaved a little differently. No one could say exactly when it began. Perhaps it had always been this way. By day, the village moved like any other. Doors opened and closed. Footsteps echoed softly on stone paths. The clock on the church tower marked the hours faithfully, its hands turning at the expected pace. But when the sun dipped below the fields and the sky softened into shades of amber and blue, something subtle changed. Time loosened its grip. Shadows lengthened more slowly here. The final birdsong lingered in the air longer than it should have. Even the breeze seemed unhurried, drifting through the streets as if it had nowhere else to be. The villagers noticed it most in small moments. A woman lighting a lamp would pause, surprised to find she had all the time she needed. A man sitting on a low stone wall would realize he could finish his thoughts before the light faded. Children, called indoors at dusk, would feel the evening stretch kindly around them, allowing one last quiet game, one more shared laugh. No one rushed. Windows glowed one by one, warm squares of light appearing gently along the lane. Inside, kettles warmed slowly, their soft sounds filling kitchens with comfort. Chairs creaked as people settled into them, not just sitting down, but arriving fully into rest. Outside, the village breathed. The clock still ticked, but its sound was less insistent now. It felt more like a reminder than a rule. Along the main street, the baker swept his doorway, moving carefully, enjoying the rhythm of the broom. At the corner cottage, an elderly woman folded her knitting, knowing she could pick it up again whenever she pleased. Time, for once, was patient. As darkness deepened, it did so gently. The sky never hurried into night here. Stars appeared one at a time, as though placed deliberately, each one given space to shine. People stepped outside simply to notice this. They stood quietly, hands in pockets, shawls drawn close, watching the sky take its time. Thoughts that had followed them all day softened and drifted away. Worries loosened, breathing slowed, dreams found room to stretch. In this village, evenings were long enough for remembering old songs, familiar faces, summers gone by. Long enough for imagining places not yet seen, stories not yet told. Long enough to simply be still, without feeling that something else needed doing. Eventually, sleep arrived, but it never hurried anyone along. Lamps dimmed when they were ready. Curtains were drawn slowly. Beds welcomed tired bodies without urgency. And when people finally closed their eyes, they did so feeling unburdened, as though the evening itself had gently carried them there. By morning, time returned to its usual pace. The village woke as it always had. But something lingered, a softness, a sense of having been given a gift. And each night, as the sun set once more, the village opened itself again to those longer hours, where rest came easily, thoughts moved slowly, and dreams were given all the space they needed. Time would slow, the evening would stretch, and the village would settle into quiet, unhurried peace. The old stone bridge that whispers good night. The bridge had been there longer than anyone could remember. It arched gently over the river, its stones smoothed by centuries of rain, wind, and passing feet. Moss clung to its edges, softening every line, and the river beneath flowed patiently, never rushing, never loud. By day, it was simply part of the village, a place to cross, to pause, to lean and watch the water pass. But by night, the bridge became something else. As evening settled and the last light faded from the sky, the river changed its voice. It no longer spoke in ripples and splashes, but in a low, steady murmur. And when the water moved just right beneath the arch, the stones of the bridge answered. Not with words, with a hum. It was so soft that most never noticed it at all. It blended with the sound of water and wind, rising and falling like a quiet breath. Those who did hear it never felt startled, only comforted. The villagers said the bridge was whispering good night. Each night, as lamps were lit along the lanes and windows glowed warm and golden, the bridge waited. It waited for footsteps slowing, for voices growing quieter, for the world to begin its gentle closing. Sometimes, a lone walker would pause at the center of the arch. They would rest their hands on the cool stone and listen. The hum would meet them there, low and steady, easing thoughts they hadn't realized they were carrying. The river flowed on. Reflections of stars drifted past, stretching and bending in the current. Leaves floated beneath the bridge, turning slowly, as if untroubled by where they were going. The bridge hummed a little deeper then, as though pleased. Children who crossed it at dusk felt suddenly calm, their steps slowing without knowing why. Animals moved quietly nearby, choosing paths that curved naturally toward rest. Nothing hurried near the bridge at night. The stones had learned patience long ago. Some believed the bridge remembered every footstep that had crossed it, every pause, every quiet moment, and that, in return, it offered comfort, one soft vibration at a time. As the night deepened, the hum grew steadier, matching the rhythm of the river below. The two had learned each other's timing, flowing together in an unspoken agreement. "Good night," said the water. "Good night," answered the stone. Eventually, even the night seemed to listen. Mist gathered lightly along the riverbank, blurring edges and softening distance. The bridge remained, calm and watchful, holding its gentle sound just above silence. Those who crossed late felt their eyelids grow heavy by the time they reached the far side. Those who stood still long enough found their breathing slowing, matching the rise and fall of the hum. And when the village finally slept, the bridge continued its quiet work. The river flowed, the stones listened, and the old bridge whispered good night to everything that passed beneath the stars. The shepherd who spoke to the hills. The hills rose and fell like slow breathing, their curves softened by long grass and evening light. At this hour, the land was neither day nor night, but something gentle in between. The shepherd knew this time well. Each evening, as the sun leaned low and the sky warmed into shades of gold and pale blue, he gathered his flock and began the long, unhurried walk home. The sheep moved calmly, bells chiming softly with each step, small, steady sounds that stitched the quiet together. The shepherd walked among them, staff in hand, cloak resting easily on his shoulders. He did not rush. The hills did not like to be hurried. He paused often, resting his hand on a stone, looking out across the valleys below. From here, the world felt wide and forgiving. Fields blended into one another, hedgerows curved like drawn lines, and distant farms glowed faintly in the last light. When the shepherd spoke, it was never loudly. He spoke to the hills. Not in words meant to be understood, but in tones shaped by years of listening. A low murmur carried by the breeze. A hum that matched the rise and fall of the land. The hills always listened. They answered in their own way, by holding the warmth of the sun a little longer, by easing the wind into something softer, by letting shadows stretch slowly rather than fall all at once. The sheep seemed to feel it too. They moved as one, calm and certain, as though guided not just by the shepherd, but by the land itself. As twilight deepened, the sky widened. Clouds thinned and drifted, unhurried, while the first stars appeared faintly above the ridge. The bells grew quieter as the flock settled into a slower pace. The shepherd stopped near the highest point of the path. He rested his staff against his shoulder and looked back across the hills. From here, the land folded into itself, layer upon layer of gentle shadow and light. He breathed in deeply, matching his breath to the rhythm of the place. The hills remembered him. They remembered his footsteps from childhood, his voice carried on the wind, his quiet patience. And in return, they offered him stillness. Night did not arrive suddenly. It was invited. A soft blue crept into the valleys. The air cooled just enough to be noticed. Crickets began their low song, joining the fading bells in a slow, comforting chorus. The shepherd spoke once more, a simple sound that drifted outward and settled into the grass. The hills held it there, safe and unbroken. When he finally turned toward home, the path was clear, familiar, welcoming. Lights glimmered faintly in the distance, waiting without urgency. Behind him, the hills settled into shadow, content and quiet. They would keep listening through the night. And the shepherd, walking steadily onward, carried their calm with him, step by step, breath by breath, until the world grew dark, and rest came easily at last. The path that only appeared at dusk. The path was never there in the morning. By daylight, the field lay open and uninterrupted, a gentle stretch of grass rolling toward the low hills beyond. Sheep grazed where they pleased, and the wind moved freely, bending the grass into slow, wandering patterns. But as evening arrived, the land began to change. It happened quietly, the way most important things do. As the sun dipped lower and the light softened into gold and pale blue, a faint line would appear in the grass. At first, it looked like nothing more than a shadow, an accident of light, perhaps. But as dusk deepened, the line became clearer. A path. It wound gently through the field, curving where the land curved, never straight, never sharp. It seemed to know exactly where it was going, even if no one else did. Those who noticed it never felt surprised. They simply slowed their steps. The air at dusk was different here, cooler, kinder. The sounds of the day softened and spread out. Birds quieted one by one. The wind lowered its voice. Even thoughts seemed to move more slowly. Walking the path required no effort. Feet followed it naturally, as though they had done so many times before. The grass beside it brushed softly against ankles, and the earth beneath felt steady and welcoming. There was no hurry on this path. It did not lead anywhere urgent. As the sky deepened into twilight, the path became clearer still, outlined by the last light of day. It passed an old oak tree where leaves whispered among themselves. It dipped briefly into a hollow where the air felt warmer, then rose again toward the hills. Those who walked it felt something gently loosen inside them. Memories surfaced, small ones, unimportant ones. A warm kitchen, a voice calling from another room. The feeling of being nearly asleep, when the world is still present but no longer demanding. The path seemed to hold these moments carefully. As darkness gathered, the first stars appeared overhead, faint and steady. The path reflected just enough light to remain visible, as though it borrowed a little glow from the sky. No one ever reached an ending. The path did not require it. Eventually, without warning or announcement, it would fade. The grass would lift itself again, smoothing over the gentle line. Night would settle fully, and the field would return to its quiet, open shape. Those who found themselves standing there afterward felt calm, rested, unburdened. They rarely tried to explain what had happened. There was no need. They simply went home, carrying the stillness with them. And each evening, as dusk returned and the world softened once more, the path appeared again, patient, familiar, and unchanging. Waiting, only at dusk. The quiet bells of Bramble Hill. Bramble Hill rose gently above the surrounding fields, its slopes soft with long grass, wild brambles, and the quiet patience of the land. It was not a dramatic hill. It did not tower or demand attention. It simply rested there, as it always had, welcoming the sky each morning and releasing it again each night. And every evening, just before dusk fully arrived, the bells began to sound. They were not loud bells. They did not ring or clang. They chimed, softly, distantly, and without hurry. No one could say exactly where they came from. Some believed they hung from the necks of sheep grazing just beyond sight. Others thought they were old bells, long since lost, carried on the wind from somewhere farther up the hill. A few said the hill itself remembered the sound, and offered it back at twilight. Whatever their source, the bells only sounded when the day was ending. As the sun lowered and the light softened into gold and lavender, Bramble Hill seemed to breathe more slowly. Shadows stretched longer, the breeze grew gentler, the world felt as though it was settling into itself. Below the hill, the village moved into evening. Doors closed with care, curtains were drawn partway, letting the last light linger. Kettles warmed, fires glowed softly, and conversations became quieter without anyone meaning them to. And above it all, the bells drifted down the slope. They were never in a rhythm that could be counted. No pattern to follow, just a calm, wandering sound, one chime here, another there, always spaced far enough apart to allow silence to rest between them. People often paused when they heard them. A walker on the lane would slow their steps. A farmer finishing the day's work would rest a hand on a gate. Even birds seemed to settle more gently when the bells were near. The bells asked for nothing. They only reminded. On the hill itself, brambles curved and tangled naturally, the dark leaves catching the last light. Bees tucked themselves away. Small animals moved quietly through the grass, unbothered, unafraid. The hill knew this hour well. Long ago, long before the village had a name, shepherds walked these slopes at dusk, guiding their flocks home. Each sheep wore a small bell, not to control them, but to keep them together. The sound meant safety. It meant no one was lost. Over time, the shepherds changed. The sheep moved on, but the hill remembered the feeling of those evenings, the slow walk home, the fading light, the comfort of knowing the day's work was done. And so the bells remained. They rang not to guide feet, but to ease minds. As twilight deepened, the bells seemed to drift farther apart, allowing longer stretches of quiet between them. The sky darkened gently, never suddenly. Stars appeared one by one, as though placed carefully. On Bramble Hill, the grass cooled beneath the night air. Dew began to form, catching faint starlight. The bells softened further, their sound blending with the breeze until it was hard to tell where one ended and the other began. Listening to them made thoughts slow down. Worries that had followed people all day loosened their hold. The mind wandered without effort, remembering warm rooms, familiar paths, voices long known. Breathing deepened, shoulders relaxed. The bells did not pull attention outward. They drew it inward. Higher up the hill, where no paths remained, the sound was clearest. Here, the bells felt closer, as if they were part of the air itself. The hill held them gently, letting them roll across its curves and into the valleys below. Nothing hurried on Bramble Hill at night. The bells continued for a while longer, never long enough to be tiring, never short enough to be missed. Then, slowly, they faded. Not all at once. One last chime would sound, soft and distant, and then silence would settle in fully. The hill rested. Below, the village slept. Lamps dimmed, fires burned low, dreams arrived without being summoned. And Bramble Hill remained, quiet and watchful, ready to offer the bells again the next evening. Always at dusk, always gently, always enough. The night deepened, the world rested, and the quiet carried on, just as it always had. The bells did not return all at once. That was the first thing the hill noticed. Night had settled fully over Bramble Hill, drawing a deep blue blanket across the land. Stars rested in the sky like scattered embers, and the moon hung low, pale and calm. The village below slept soundly, its lights dimmed, its thoughts softened. Usually, this was the hour of complete quiet. But on this night, something stirred. Not a sound at first, only a feeling, as though the air itself had paused to listen. The grass along the slope moved gently, though there was no wind. Brambles shifted slightly, their leaves brushing one another with the faintest whisper. The hill, old and patient, became aware of itself in a way it had not been for a long time. And then, very softly, a bell sounded. Just one. It was distant, barely more than a suggestion of sound, as though it had traveled a great length of time to arrive here. The hill held it carefully, letting it roll across the grass and settle into the night. The bell did not echo. It did not repeat. It simply existed, and then faded. Far below, a sleeper shifted gently in their bed. A dream changed shape, becoming calmer, slower. Breathing deepened. On Bramble Hill, the bell sounded again. This time, it was closer. Not closer in distance, but in feeling, warmer, more familiar. It reminded the hill of old evenings when lanterns glowed in cottages that no longer stood, and footsteps moved steadily home along paths now softened back into grass. The bells were not calling anyone. They were remembering. One by one, they returned, not many, not quickly. Each bell arrived with a pause afterward, leaving room for silence to stretch comfortably between the sounds. The hill listened. The bells drifted across its slopes, weaving through hollows and rising again along the ridges. They brushed against stones half buried by time, against roots that had grown deep and slow, against memories the land itself carried quietly. Somewhere near the crest of the hill, where the stars felt closest, the bells seemed to gather. Their sound blended into something almost like a hum, steady, soothing, unbroken. The hill responded in the only way it knew how. It held still. The night deepened, but never grew heavy. The moonlight softened the edges of everything it touched. Mist gathered low along the ground, curling gently around the brambles like a blanket drawn up for comfort. The bells continued, not louder, not faster, just present. They reminded the land, and anyone dreaming beneath it, that nothing was required at this moment. There was nowhere to go, nothing to solve, no reason to stay awake. The bells did not keep time. They released it. Gradually, as the night grew older, the bells began to space themselves farther apart. The hum loosened, thinning back into individual chimes. Each one lingered a little less than the last. The hill did not resist. It understood endings that did not feel like endings at all. One final bell sounded, so faint it could almost be mistaken for the night itself shifting. It settled gently into the grass and disappeared without leaving a trace. Silence returned. Not empty silence, but full, layered with rest, memory, and ease. Bramble Hill rested once more, its work done for the night. The bells would return when they were needed again, as they always had. Until then, the hill slept beneath the stars, holding the quiet for everyone below. The night breathed in, and breathed out, and carried on, slow and kind. The night loosened its hold without anyone noticing. It did not end all at once. It softened. Above Bramble Hill, the stars dimmed gently, one by one, as if slipping away to rest somewhere else. The moon thinned and faded, leaving the sky pale and open. A cool hush lingered, holding the land in a final moment of stillness. The bells were quiet now. They had not sounded since the deepest part of the night, and the hill did not expect them to. This hour belonged to a different kind of calm, the calm that comes just before waking, when dreams thin and the mind floats easily between sleep and morning. Mist rested along the slopes of Bramble Hill, lying low and patient. It filled the hollows and softened every edge, turning grass and stone into gentle shapes. Dew clung to leaves and brambles, catching the faintest hints of light. The hill breathed slowly. Far below, the village began to stir, not with movement, but with readiness. A sleeper turned over. A window creaked softly as it cooled. Somewhere, a kettle waited on a cold hearth. Nothing hurried the dawn here. The hill remembered mornings like this from long ago, when shepherds rose before the sun, when paths were walked quietly, when the world felt new without being unfamiliar. It remembered how the bells had once rested silent at dawn, their work finished, their presence no longer needed. They were never meant for morning. The bells belonged to the in-between. As light grew slowly along the eastern edge of the sky, birds began the gentle calls, single notes at first, spaced far apart. The sound settled easily into the quiet, not breaking it, but joining it. The mist shifted slightly, lifting just enough to reveal the soft curve of the hill. Bramble Hill held steady. The bells did not return, but they were not gone. Their memory remained, woven into the land, into the stillness, into the easy breath of the morning air. Anyone passing through the hill at this hour might feel it without knowing why. A sense of having rested well. A calm that did not ask questions. A quiet that stayed. As the sun finally rose, pale and unassuming, it warmed the grass just enough to dry the dew. The mist thinned, drifting away without resistance. The hill opened itself fully to the day. Paths that had been hidden became visible again, not special ones, just familiar routes shaped by time and use. The brambles caught the light along their edges. The land looked ordinary, and yet, something lingered. Those who woke that morning carried the night with them, not as a memory, but as a feeling. Thoughts moved gently. Movements were unhurried. The day began without weight. Bramble Hill watched over it all, quiet and unchanged. When evening came again, the hill would be ready. The bells would remember when to return. They always did. For now, the morning settled in. The hill rested. The world stirred softly, and the quiet remained, just beneath everything, waiting patiently for dusk.